Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to this session on transforming food systems for healthy and sustainable diet. My name is Francesco Branca. I am the director of the Department of Nutrition and Food Safety at the World Health Organization in Geneva. And I'm pleased to be with you today to moderate this session on transforming food system for healthy and sustainable diets. And yes, indeed, at the Health Summit, we need to discuss food systems. Current food systems provide neither food security nor nutrition and health for all. This is clear from the high prevalence of all forms of malnutrition, undernutrition, such as stunting, wasting, micronutrient deficiencies, as well as overweight, obesity, and diet-related non-communicable diseases. The 2021 United Nations Food Systems Summit called for urgent transformation of our food systems to deliver healthy diets from sustainable food systems for all. Many countries have developed food system transformation pathways that require changes in public and private investment and in policies regulating food environments. The session will dive into the challenges, needs, and opportunities required to transform food systems, including addressing commercial determinants of malnutrition and leveraging them towards healthy and sustainable diets. WHO's food system transformation agenda includes a package of priority food system for health policy actions. And we are working in close collaboration with partners, many of which are present here today in this event. Examples of these policy actions are ensuring public food procurements, invest in healthy food and beverages, using fiscal instruments such as taxation and subsidies to make healthier food more affordable, and marketing regulations to shape consumer purchasing decisions. These measures have proven to be effective enablers of food system transformation. We have a great lineup of speakers, each with a different background, reflecting the diverse array of actors needing. Some of them are here in the audience, some of them will join us remotely. And they will reflect the diverse array of actors needing to work in cohesion to achieve a significant shift in the food system to ensure it delivers healthy and sustainable diets. So let's just start. And I'd like to say that we'll have two keynotes at the beginning, then we'll have a very interesting and lively fireside chat. And then we'll have a panel that will tell us about the food system transformation, concrete country changes experience. So I'd like to now invite to the stage the first of the keynote speakers, Dr. Tom Frieden, who is a physician trained in internal medicine, infectious diseases, but is the chief executive officer of Resolve to Save Lives. Tom. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Francesco. It's great to be with you all and great to see this focus on transforming food systems. So I'll start with the bottom line. The bottom line is that our food environment is deeply unhealthy. And unless we change that, millions of people will suffer from avoidable illness and die early from preventable death. We know, as Francesco emphasized, that we have multiple problems in the nutrition space. Undernutrition, stunting, micronutrient deficiencies are not only severe problems, but they're worsening over the past couple of years with the pandemic, inflation, supply chain interruptions, and more. Hundreds of millions of children and adults are undernourished, and this has increased in recent years. We know that undernutrition of women leads not only to avoidable health problems in women themselves, but also to the next generation being condemned to a less healthy phenotype. Childhood malnutrition can have a lifelong impact on health. Micronutrient deficiencies affect, in the case of vitamin A, more than 100 million children around the world. Iodine and folate deficiencies among pregnant and women of childbearing age are the norm rather than exception in many countries, and vitamin D deficiency is common and near universal in some parts of the world. Furthermore, obesity really is a reflection of poor quality nutrition. More food is not better, better food is better. As with healthcare, so with nutrition, we need quality, not necessarily quantity, although certainly we need a sufficient quantity of macro and micronutrients for every person in the world. We also need to have humility about what we know and what we don't know. And if we've learned anything from the pandemic, is that public health can be most effective at bringing communities along when it listens, engages, and is clear about what we know, how we know it, what we don't know, and what we're going to do to try to find that out. Now, the plain reality is that the market does not solve nutrition problems today. The market can be an important part of the solution. And there are companies, and I'll mention one, that are making real contributions. But currently, not only is the market not the solution, but it's a big part of the problem. Voluntary changes are much less likely to result in sustainable, positive, healthy development than is a predictable regulatory framework. And I think many industry players really want to see that predictability. They don't want to see rapid or irrational regulation. They want to see a level playing field. There is a way forward with this. Now, humility about what we know is not a call not to do more. It's a call to do what we know works and to increase our practice-based evidence. We have a lot of talk of evidence-based practice, but we also need to try things, see what works, and then scale them up. There is a lot of there are a lot of things that are not known about what are the major drivers of obesity. And I think we have to be humble about that. We know that there's an imbalance in calories. We know that there's been a drastic increase in the consumption of added sugars, whether in the form of sugar-sweetened beverages or otherwise. We know that portion size is increasing, that consumption of restaurant and out-of-home foods are increasing as a proportion of both spend and calories, that marketing and product placement drive consumption, that healthy food is more expensive than unhealthy food in most countries, that regulations can make a difference, including potentially labeling of ultra-processed foods. Whether endocrine disruption or microbiome changes or method of delivery or viral infections make a difference, we really don't know. But there's a lot of room for doing more and learning more. And I'll just conclude with 5 key areas which are wins. They're indisputable problems with clear solutions. Micronutrient deficiencies, artificial trans fat, excess sodium consumption, excess consumption of added and concentrated sugars, and the higher cost of healthier foods. So taking those one at a time, let's be clear that simply encouraging people to eat better and exercise more will not only fail, but is essentially a form of blaming the victim. We know that people have an individual responsibility. We don't abdicate that responsibility, but we also know that in most societies, if you go with the flow, you will end up overweight or obese, because that is the structure of our society. And just as 150 years ago, infectious diseases were common because food and water and air were unhealthy. Similarly, today, our food environment is unhealthy and is driving the illness. So we're not absolving individuals from the responsibility, but we're not either absolving society from the responsibility of establishing the structure to make the healthy choice the easier choice, the default value. Fortification programs are a huge win. There's been progress, but there's more progress to be made. Increasing taxes on sugar-sweetened beverages can increase the price and decrease consumption. Front of pack warnings of the kind implemented in Argentina, Mexico, Chile initially, and other countries are clearly effective at both encouraging industry to reformulate so that you have healthier options and facilitating more informed choices. So you have both healthier options and healthier choices. I want to focus for a moment on artificial trans fat, one of the focus areas for my group, Resolve to Save Lives, in partnership with Francesco and his unit and the World Health Organization, which has called for the global elimination of artificial trans fat. There are a lot of declarations and plans and resolutions about non-communicable disease, but there's not enough action. When all is said and done, a whole lot more is said than done. And elimination of artificial trans fat is not easy, but it is one of the least hard of the NCD interventions. In 2017, only 14 countries covering only about 1 in 15 people worldwide was protected from this artificial toxic chemical. In the 4 years since the World Health Organization launched the Replace strategy to eliminate trans fat, there's been real progress. 35 countries have adopted best practice policies. Middle-income countries now lead the way, with India, Bangladesh, Philippines, Argentina, and Brazil all having passed policies in recent years. 3.1 billion people, more than a third of the world, are protected. And it's clear that the WHO package provides the tools to eliminate trans fat without changing the cost or availability of food. Only your heart will know the difference. We also know that there's been good engagement from the industry here, with Rocco and IFBA making an early commitment. And I want to call out for praise Cargill, which has committed to eliminating trans fat from its entire supply chain globally by the end of 2023, the WHO deadline. That's not easy to do. Cargill could have simply said, okay, we'll stop making it, but they're actually working with their partners, with their customers, to replace trans fat with healthier oil. That's not easy, but it's an important example of how within a regulatory framework, seeing the writing on the wall that trans fat will be a thing of the past, industry can play a very constructive role. Eliminating artificial trans fat will save an estimated 17.5 million lives over 25 years after the world achieves elimination, but all countries have to get there. Sodium reduction is a second area which is challenging. There are somewhere around 2 million excess deaths per year from excess sodium consumption. And there are countries that have made progress. In the United Kingdom, for about a decade, there were focused efforts. And when there were focused efforts, there was progress. When there was no more focused effort, progress stopped. So this is not something that can be done as a one and done way. In Brazil, we saw food standards make a big difference. As I mentioned, Chile, Argentina, Mexico have a multi-component program, including front of pack warnings, marketing restrictions, restrictions on what can be sold in public places. And this can make a really big difference. Extending the reach of the World Health Organization global sodium benchmarks, increasing adoption of the action framework for public procurement. Why should any person consume subsidized food that doesn't meet the government standards for health? This is a simple concept, but not simple to get implemented. And the promotion of low sodium salt, an exciting technology that has been documented by the George Institute in multiple countries to save lives and save money. Poor quality food is estimated to be the main contributor to the global burden of disease, accounting for about 1 in 5 premature deaths globally. Governments and the public sector, working by regulating and partnering with the commercial sector, have the power to change the food systems in many ways, eliminating artificial trans fat, reducing sodium consumption, increasing the price of unhealthy food, reducing the price of healthy food, having clear front of pack warnings, taxation as a means of increasing both revenue and health, and implementing, documenting, resisting industry manipulation, but welcoming the constructive engagement within a regulatory framework. Our food is truly a matter of life and death. And so nothing could be higher priority than transforming our food environment. Thank you very much.
Tom, thank you very much for your usual passion in indicating how food system transformation is indeed possible. We've had this incredible collaboration on the effort to reduce trans fat. Now we have in front of us a year, an intense year, hopefully, to get that last mile. It's a bit more than a mile, perhaps still a lot to do, but really important to get, as using your words, the first non-communicable disease to be eradicated. So this can be done on non-communicable disease. So thank you very much for that. And I'd like now to turn to, you feel free to stay here or sit there as you like. We turn now to Dr. Geeta Sethi, who is the advisor and global lead for food system of the World Bank, who is joining us from remote. Geeta, can you hear us?
Very well. Good morning. Good day to all. I am absolutely delighted and honored to be here today amongst thought leaders and action leaders. And as my speakers have just said, Francesco and Tom both, food systems today has multiple responsibilities that are central to sustainable development today more than ever. Let me start with three things. Food system needs to deliver healthy people. We heard a lot from Tom about that. Food systems need to ensure people can afford and access healthy diets. International poverty lines today is hovering at $1.90. Some extreme poverty is $2.17. Healthy diets is about $4 per capita. There is a big disconnect in terms of what we are asking people to eat and what they can afford. So Tom is exactly right that governments need to step up on affordability. Today, as we speak, 3 billion people, that is every second person on this planet, is suffering from some elements of malnutrition, either too little calories or no calories, or too much calories or wrong types of calories. And COVID-19 has exposed the relevance of food systems and reduced immunity and comorbidities that add to the burden of infectious diseases. We also know today the role of malnutrition, defined to be consumption of ultra-processed food to mental health, particularly of youth worldwide. And this has huge implications for human capital going forward. And should I even mention food safety, which we tend to take as a given aspiration. Second, food systems needs to deliver a healthy planet. Today, millions of hectares of tropical forests are lost to agricultural expansion. The vanishing water into irrigation, pollution of our oceans, disappearing biodiversity, increasing pandemics, zoonotic in nature. COVID was a start, as my colleague Frank would tell us. What about GHG emissions? 25% of total global greenhouse gas emissions. An IPCC report says 58% increase with business as usual. So the highest emitter with business as usual is going to be the food sector. And the third contribution of food systems is towards healthy economy. Why are 500 farmers today that are producing food are not able to feed themselves? The ESG standards. Why are companies not moving to mandatory from voluntary, living income, living wages? And this is why we need to get a table ready for 10 billion, 3 billion more than we have today. With all of this scenario on the food system, shockingly, we waste about 1/3 or 30% of food that's produced. Not only are we wasting food, we are wasting land, water, forests, minerals, fertilizers, human effort, etc. And this food generates GHGs, global greenhouse gas emissions. As you may have heard before, if food loss and waste was a country, it would have been the third highest emitter. Arable size land of China is harvested with food never making it to the tables. So the current challenge of the food system is quite massive. And I would even dare to say, with the turmoil in Europe, food systems needs to lean in much more if we do want to make our commitment to Paris, given the energy security that Europe is going to be looking for in the coming months. All of these challenges brings me to how food is being financed today, and the way financing and investment has been deployed for the region, is the reason we find ourselves in this situation. We need a very different kind of financing, one that worries about global public goods and pervasive externalities, one that eliminates poverty, one that does not mortgage the future of our children. And that was a thought piece, food finance architecture, that we had delivered as custodians of the finance lever for the just ended UN Food Summit. And my colleague Stefanos is here to carry this conversation to the next chapter, where we are working very closely in moving the food finance architecture to reality in countries. The food finance architecture had 5 imperatives. First, reshape public support to agriculture. Today, close to $1 trillion, over $700 billion a year, is going to public support to agriculture, 85% of which is distorting and non-green. Second, we need to integrate health, environment, and social risks into financial decision-making. World Benchmarking Alliance just did a report for 350 top corporates in the food sector, and the results were quite humbling and sobering. Less than 15% of the companies actually are declaring they are doing climate disclosures, to give you an example. Third imperative, there needs to be a scale fit for purpose financial products and business models coming in the food sector. Private finance that has very deep pockets is hesitating coming into the food sector with a perception of risk. For some reason, we in the food sector have not been able to price risk in a way that allows private finance to come in. This is urgently needed. The change agents have to be the private finance, and that was also referred by my speakers earlier. Fourth, affordable diets. And again, it begs the question that when poverty lines are below the price of a healthy diet, then can income support programs that the world is pursuing could be more nutrition sensitive. And finally, given the big shock the world has seen, crisis to crisis, from COVID to turmoil in Europe, we do need a very different governance and stability model. In a nutshell, food systems does not lack financing, I would argue. As I mentioned, the agricultural support, public support to agriculture and food is $700 billion a year. Just to put this into perspective, if food subsidies were a country, they would be the 19th largest economy in the world, close to Netherlands or Turkey. And this is not even considering the massive spending of the private sector, which is north of $2 trillion. Consumer spending on food is about 12 to 15% of global GDP, which hovers at $88 trillion. So it gives a sense that there is financing happening in food, but it's just not the right way. And as Tom also alluded to, financing to keep food prices low is wrong financing. Many people do not have access to food, not because food is too expensive, but because their incomes are too low. Food needs to reflect the true pricing, a price that reflects the huge environment and health costs embodied in the food, from depletion of environment, global greenhouse gas emissions, loss of labor productivity, premature death, and healthcare. The hidden cost of the food system is $12 to $18 trillion today by different estimates, at least 20% higher than the market value of $10 trillion. We can be certain that higher food prices, there would be less food loss and waste. Sony doesn't produce 3 TVs and throws one out. So why do we do this in the food sector? Food would be more precious, not infinitely abundant. It is symptomatic that today, restaurants, and Tom alluded to this as well, in the US are reducing portion sizes, a major source of waste, in response to the higher food prices triggered by recent failure of supply chains due to COVID, war, and bad weather. What we want is that the entire world population, now and forthcoming, have the means to consume diets that are good for them and for the planet. What we need is financing that endows the people with sufficient income to buy food they need to be healthy and to preserve the planet, while at the same time pricing food for its true value.
Thank you, Gita. Thank you for this very important message. So I'd like to thank you for this. Thank you. You've indicated some important messages about how food system transformation can take place, and particularly the 85% of the important investment, which is actually distorting. A lot of these subsidies are actually given in high-income countries, not in low-income countries. They're given to commodities that do not support healthy diet. They're given to maize, potatoes, livestock. So that definitely is an avenue for transformation. Thank you very much, Gita. And I'd like now to move to another very important and interesting section of our conversation today. I'd like to invite to the stage here Rocco Rinaldi, who is the Secretary General of the International Food and Beverage Alliance. So let's welcome him. And IFBA was founded in 2008 by the CEOs of leading food and non-alcoholic beverage companies to empower consumers to eat balanced diets and live healthier lives. And we have on the other side of the ocean, but very close to us in heart, Professor Marion Nessel. She's Paulette Goddard Professor of Nutrition, Food Studies and Public Health at the University of New York. Marion is very well known. She's writing to examine scientific and socioeconomic influences on food choice and its consequences, emphasizing the role of the food industry marketing. So we thought of bringing them together in a friendly way. It doesn't matter that you are separate by the screen, so you cannot fight. You can fight. So we'll start with Marion, actually. Marion, from your pivotal book, Food Politics, to your recent publication on the aspirational agenda of regulating the food industry, you have led a new wave of advocates for action on nutrition. Your recent books, Low Cooked and Unexpected Life in Food Politics, is a bit of biography. So I look forward to reading it. So could you share with us your perspective on the commercial determinants of obesity, which have shaped our current food system? Over to you, Marion.
Yes, thank you, Francesco. And I'm delighted to be here. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. The commercial determinants of obesity and chronic disease have been very, very well described by a fairly large number of writers by this time. And there were a couple of Lancet commissions that looked at these kinds of things. In particular, the Lancet Commission on the Global Syndemic of Hunger, Obesity, and Climate Change. And in that, the commissioners described the barriers that we face when we're trying to do something in public health. And I guess the easiest way to describe the situation is that food companies are not social service agencies. They're not public health agencies. They're businesses with stockholders to please. They have to put profits to stockholders as their first priority, no matter what the people in the companies think they would like to do about hunger, malnutrition, chronic disease, and climate change. And we have seen that in the United States in any number of companies that have attempted to do public health and to put public health as a priority. Their stockholders get very upset. And when stockholders are upset, it's not very good for business. So the Global Syndemic Report talked about those barriers and talked about how trying to do something about this is hampered by governments who are basically controlled by corporations, certainly a situation that we see in the United States. They're hampered by civil society that is not organized nearly enough about advocacy for food system issues. I wish we could do that better. And then a very strong and focused food industry industry that is very clear about what its objectives are, so that anytime that you try to talk to food companies about their need to be more sustainable or to produce healthier products, they tell you flat out, we would love to be able to do that, but our stockholders won't let us. And I have seen this in action. I once attended a meeting during the Obama administration about food marketing to children. You would think that food marketing to children would be the simplest thing in the world to do something about. But there were food industry executives at that meeting who said, quite flatly, we would love to stop marketing to children. We think it's wrong, but we cannot stop. Our stockholders will not let us. Because the products that they are marketing to children and the products that are most profitable, unfortunately, are the products that we now call ultra processed. Ultra processed is this relatively new term that refers to a category of what used to be called, more impolitely, junk foods. A category of junk foods that are industrially produced, don't look like the foods that they came from, cannot be made in home kitchens, and are now shown to be extraordinarily highly correlated with obesity, chronic disease, and premature mortality, and also in a controlled clinical trial to encourage people to consume more calories. Not only more calories, but a lot more calories. So these are the kinds of foods that we really ought to be figuring out how to eat less of. And we should eat less of them by having smaller portions, and we should eat less of them by not eating them at all, or eating them in very, very small quantities. But these are the products that are most profitable for food companies. So that is the dilemma that public health people are up against in working with food companies. And what we have seen in the United States is food companies health washing and greenwashing, saying what they are going to do to make their products more sustainable and healthier, and then doing the opposite under pressure under enormous financial pressure. So the solution to this has to be to regulate these companies and to establish a regulatory framework that puts all food companies on the same level playing field, as Tom Frieden said. And yet the possibility of doing that in a government that is essentially there because food companies and other corporations have funded their elections is a very, very difficult situation to be in. And it's one that public health advocates have to figure out how to deal with, which means increasing advocacy in civil society. I'll stop here for the moment.
Thank you, Mariam. We have a lot of support here in the audience, Mariam. But let me turn to Rocco. Rocco, you heard Mariam, so I would like to hear from you how the private sector can play an active role in transforming the food system to be healthier and more sustainable, and not health washing or greenwashing. What are the current challenges of the efforts? And you know, what do you say about the commitment, for example, that Tom also mentioned about the elimination of trans fat?
Thank you, Francesco. And Marion, I'm humbled to be on the same panel with you, because I've been reading your books for a long time, and you have certainly a particular standing, and you are the most respectable opponent in this sort of debate. So with that preamble, obviously, I don't agree with everything you said, but I pick up some things that I think are important to us, and I'll come back to, because Tom referenced them in the first instance too. But to respond more directly to your question, first of all, Francesco, our member companies are the leading international companies in the food and non-alcoholic beverage sector. And they are, I can say, embracing the sustainable food systems agenda. It's not a matter of greenwashing or whitewashing. It's partly a matter of enlightenment, but it's also a matter of self-interest, and you can call it enlightened self-interest. Starting with climate change, I mean, we've got to a place in the world where it is clear that unless we act, our own sustainability as humans is compromised. And if you translate that on a company level, it means your ability to source what you need to produce the food is compromised. We've all seen it with the droughts, the floods, the extreme climate events that are happening all over the place. So all our companies are actually committed to net zero along the lines of the Paris Agreement. So they are mostly ahead of where governments are on the climate agenda. They all have sustainable sourcing strategies in place. They aim to ensure zero deforestation in the supply chains, zero slave labor, and so on and so forth. They all have resource efficiency drives because it's obviously necessary to reduce your environmental impact. It's also necessary, particularly today, to keep your costs in check and your business actually viable. They all have circular economy programs, in particular when it comes to packaging, for instance. So moving to a circular system in terms of recyclability and in terms of food waste reduction. Many of them, if not most of them, have a drive towards plant-based foods, which are increasingly in demand and which are, we believe, an important part of a shift towards a more sustainable food system. When it comes to health and nutrition, you referenced the earlier commitment that was mentioned by Tom Frieden on industrial trans fat elimination. Our companies agreed to do that by 2023, and we have essentially completed that worldwide. So if you look at any of the major food brands on the shelves, now they are industrial trans fat free, whether you are in the United States or whether you are in Egypt or South America. And we are putting our expertise at the disposal of the wider industry to help achieve that. And we are supportive of regulation along the lines of the WHO recommendations on that field. We also last year made a commitment on sodium, another important area referenced by Tom at the Tokyo Nutrition Summit, to achieve a global set of sodium targets for our products by 2025 and 2030. These are minimum global targets. You can go further at national level, but that's at least a global commitment that we have made. And it is something that will continue also because consumer demand is evolving. The COVID pandemic has been, in one sense, an advancement because consumers are more health conscious. A survey I have seen recently in 30 countries shows that over 60% of consumers now want to actively improve their health. And 30% or so are actively doing something, including on diet, to improve their health. That's still a big gap, 30% who want to but are not doing anything. But there's still more than used to be. At the same time, the COVID pandemic has taken us back a couple of decades in terms of progress on food security. There's at least 200-300 people who are hungry today that were not hungry before. The current situation, and we have to call it out, war is causing famine, and war is causing food insecurity. And when you have food insecurity, everything else is irrelevant. Nutrition falls by the wayside. And so does sustainability. So at the moment, at this particular moment, we have a difficult situation, a difficult economic backdrop of food insecurity, of rapidly spiraling energy prices and food inflation. For better or for worse, food prices are linked to energy prices. And that is clearly challenging because a food company can't just put up its prices without due consideration to the impact that's going to have on consumer demand. We are in a competitive marketplace. It is absolutely true. A company cannot do that which will compromise consumer demand and its market share. And so it is necessarily, a company will be necessarily cautious in terms of how it moves And also, who does it pass the cost on? And the cost of sustainability, be it health and nutrition, or be it the environmental side, has to be thought through, because we're talking fundamentally about internalizing externalities. And internalizing externalities means essentially absorbing the cost. Shareholders do want returns. Returns in the food industry are not particularly high. Shareholders probably want a bit more than your average food industry can offer. We've seen it in leading companies recently with visionary CEOs who've been regrettably, sent home by shareholders. At the same time, you have minority shareholders who demand stronger health targets and are achieving them in some cases. So there is this juxtaposition, there is this tension. But a really important question, and I'll stop because maybe you'll prompt me with some more questions, but a really important question is, how do we rebalance the economics of the food system?
Thank you, Rocco. So the challenge is an economic challenge, particularly now, but there is actually energy and willingness to commit, also because that's the demand of the consumers. Marion, you mentioned at the end, I'd like actually you to comment on what Rocco has said about the reformulation commitment. Do you think that's a good avenue, and do you think that something is happening? I saw your blog, and you actually you report the ATMI analysis indicating that not very much has happened. So how would you comment on Rocco's point about voluntary formulation? And then you mentioned regulatory actions. So what regulatory actions countries should prioritize?
Well, what I heard was what I said, that the food companies are forced by economic considerations to keep costs low, and to keep their prices low, and in order to keep their profits high. That's their primary consideration. What Rocco didn't talk about is what food companies are doing behind the scenes to protect their investors' rights or their investors' interests. He's not talking about the amount of money that they spend lobbying, the amount of money they spend funding research. He's not talking about the amount of money that food companies spend on trying to get scientists to cooperate with them and get nutritionists to cooperate with them. He's focusing on nutrients, not the foods themselves. When we're talking about ultra-processed foods, we're talking about the most profitable products, which obviously people love and want to buy, and are formulated to make people want to buy them. But these are the products that people should be eating less of, and food companies cannot get people to eat less of these foods and stay in business. That's the dilemma. Therefore, we need regulation. It seems pretty obvious to me that we need regulation. And I think there's consumer demand, but not nearly enough consumer demand. We ought to be doing what the Lancet Commission suggested, which is, number one, keeping food companies out of public policy decisions. They should not be at the table when public health policy is being discussed. They need to be regulated in terms of marketing and in terms of what the formulation of their products is. Although, for me, a gram or two of sugar in a cereal is hardly going to make any difference. What you really want is you want people eating real foods. You want those foods priced in a way that allows people to be able to afford them. In the United States, the subsidies for agriculture go to feed for animals and fuel for automobiles. They don't go for food for humans. That needs to be changed. I wish we could change that in the United States. Lots of people are working on that. It would be good to do that. And so we need a complete, I agree with Rocco completely. We need a complete transformation of the way that our food system is being financed. And everybody should be working on that.
Thank you, Marion. So, Rocco, you heard Marion saying that reformulation doesn't go far enough. I think that's the first point. And then, so I'd like you to comment on that. And then she mentioned really a regulatory environment where the public sector just gives you the rules and you just implement them. What do you think about self-regulation? Do you have examples that self-regulation can actually be useful? Where you have, for example, you've released some documents about marketing, and so you are indicating that you are willing to reduce the marketing of food to children.
Yes, reformulation is not the answer to everything. I think reformulation is important, and I think it's in your best buys. I think sodium reduction, sugar reduction, so on. So reformulation needs to happen. Innovation is even more important, because innovation it can take you much further often than reformulation can. Reformulation on a voluntary basis, obviously a company has to take their consumers with them. You're not going to reformulate and compromise taste, because you're going to lose a consumer. If you lose a consumer, you've lost the battle, because you haven't made a difference. So reformulation needs to continue. Self-regulation plays a part. When you talk about reformulation, our sole targets, our ITFA elimination, that's self-regulation. We're also self-regulating in terms of responsible marketing. We have a global policy each of our companies as a minimum subscribe to, and most individual companies go individually further. And they have results. We've reduced children's exposure to TV advertising for HFSS products, for instance. That doesn't mean that regulation doesn't have its place. And I want to come back to the concept that Tom espoused earlier, which is about a predictable regulatory framework. I'd go a little further than predictable. It needs to be predictable. It also needs to be science-based. It needs to be conducive to innovation. It needs to use regulation in a smart way, i.e. use regulation in a way that incentivizes positive and progressive change and evolution. And above all, it needs to be a holistic approach to policymaking. It needs to be a food systems approach. And perhaps beyond the food systems approach, it needs to be something like, I think the most interesting example currently is the European Green Deal, because the European Green Deal is a proposal to transform the European economy for a green transition, and green in a very broad sense, and because it includes health and nutrition. The European Farm to Fork strategy is a very comprehensive set of measures that seeks to move the many elements of the food system at the same time. Because if you don't do that, then you're going to create tensions, you're going to create unintended consequences, and you're going to create contradictions that potentially undermine what you're trying to achieve in the first place. So that holistic, predictable framework is important. It needs to be science-based in a sense that, you know, I'll pick one fight with you, Marion, if I may. You know, you said it earlier, ultra-processed food is what we used to call junk food. That's okay, but then don't tell me it's a scientific concept. It never was. So we can't use that to underpin
the popularized name. Now we call it ultra-processed food as well.
It's fine if you want to use it in that way, but then saying it is a scientific concept is a little tricky. I think we need something more granular. We have ways to look at gradual nutritional improvements of processed foods. My conviction is that demonizing processed foods is simply not the answer. The real answer is how to rebalance the system so that different types of food occupy the right space within that system.
Thank you, Rocco. And Mario, maybe I would like to really have this session continuing until the end, but I'd like also to give the floor to the other panelists. So can I have just your last bite? I mean, I know you have made several incursions in the headquarters of several large companies, and you've been heard by the CEOs. Now, today, what message would you like Rocco to convey to the CEOs?
To take ultra-processed foods as a concept extremely seriously. What I heard Rocco say was what the food industry always does, which is, first of all, to cast doubt on the science. I think the concept of ultra-processed foods is one of the most important innovations in nutrition since vitamins, and that it needs to be taken very seriously because the amount of research that backs it up as a problem in encouraging people to eat more food is very, very clear and overwhelming. There's so much evidence now that shows that to ignore that evidence is really a mistake. I think companies need to look at what they're doing to stop producing ultra-processed foods and to understand that they have a responsibility for health in a way that they've never had before, and to take that responsibility very seriously. I would say ordinarily, because if they don't, they're going to get regulated, but I'm not sure that governments are strong enough to do that. But they should expect a great deal of consumer resistance if they keep going on with the kinds of things they're doing. That's all.
Thank you, Marion. And Rocco, vice versa, what kind of message you would like Marion to give to the food activist community through her blogs?
I couldn't really hear you. I think you asked me what message I would take.
What message would you like Marion to give to the food activist community through her blogs?
I would say engage. The food system is primarily made of companies and individuals, including farmers from farm to distribution, etc., who make food and who are trying to make the best food they can to serve to their customers, to their consumers, and so on. So these are millions and millions of individuals and companies, and they're part of a system. Engage with this system, understand this system, and try to drive change in a whole of society way beyond the health sector, beyond the nutrition sector, because we're all part of the same system. And if it's that system that change, we can only change it together. There will be conflict in that togetherness, but it is indispensable.
Well, thank you. Thanks both of you for this very interesting conversation. And so thank you, Rocco. Thank you, Marion. I'd like to invite now the next set of panelists. So we have with us online Dr. Stefanos Fotiou, the director of the UN Food System Coordination Hub. We also have online Mrs. Doris Heberle, the heads of the Division of Nutrition in the Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture here in Germany. We're very honored to have Dr. Ifereini Wakanabeta, the Minister for Health and Medical Services of Fiji. Please come. Welcome. And Dr. Anders Nordström, Ambassador for Global Health, UN Policy Department of Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you. Welcome. So we'll start with Stefanos. Stefanos, 1 year after the UN Food System Summit, where are we with the food system transformation overall?
Thank you, Francesco. Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me here. Very nice to join you virtually from Rome. To answer this question, I would like to cluster my reply, Francesco, on where we stand, where three big groups of actors are standing. And I will start with the first group, which is the countries, the governments that they have committed to food system transformations 1 year ago in New York in September 2021. And I would say, without a big hesitation, that there's some good news from this group of the governments. We see that the countries are following up on the commitments that they have given to the Food System Summit. And actually, we see a very big diversity of activities and follow-up actions. The last months, the UN Food Systems Coordination Hub is in direct contact with many countries, I would say mostly with countries in developing and least developed countries that they try to follow up with their pathways. And we see a variety of actions. Just let me give you 3 specific examples of discussion we had the last 3 days with some countries. I finished a discussion this morning with Indonesia, who wants to put together in the next months a national finance strategy for food system transformations. So Indonesia is taking the next step by trying to translate the food system pathways to a finance strategy. And this is very important, because when we put the money behind the plan, we can hope for implementation. Last Friday, we were talking with our colleagues in Uruguay, and Uruguay is putting together 2 national studies, one on healthy diets and a second on food loss and waste, to understand where the country is in on this and take measures to improve the situation. And tomorrow, I'm having a meeting with our colleagues from Bhutan, where they want to take their national pathway and inform a revision of their national agricultural strategy and make this national agricultural strategy be now compatible with the 2030 agenda and have the same timeline. So this kind of actions we see happening in many countries. And this is a testament that the countries are walking the talk of the food system transformations. They do have, they start facing those some issues. The food, fuel, fertilizer, and finance crisis that it's affecting them. And now they need to really advocate more for prioritizing the food systems. And that's one big lesson we take, that we need all of us in the UN system, in the donor countries, to support keeping the momentum. So message number 1, the countries are following up. The second group is the UN system. And here we try in the UN Food System Coordination Hub to bring the UN food systems together at different levels. At the global level, Francesco, you know the work that the UN Task Force is doing, and we're looking forward to follow up with this. But let me go at the national level. We see the leading role that the UN resident coordinators are taking on following up the summit, and this is very encouraging. I think we need more coordination at the national level. I think that the UN resident coordinators, they have in their agenda as a top item the food system follow-up and the food system transformation pathway support, and we're for. The third, and here I must say that I think we need a lot more work, is what we call in the UN Food System Coordination Hub the ecosystem of support. What is the ecosystem of support? Is the coalitions that they are emerging after the summit, the finance institutions, the donors, the bilateral and multilateral agencies. So we see there that there's a very big interest on supporting countries for food system transformation pathways. But I think we need more coordination, because the countries, and especially the developing countries, they don't understand exactly what is the support that this ecosystem will provide. And this is why, when I will finish my first intervention, Francesco, in the UN Food System Coordination Hub, we will start an effort to put together something, we call it the Food System Solution Library. So to reach out to the whole ecosystem of support and understand what are the specific products, services, and resources that they can provide to the countries that they want to implement their food system pathways. By reaching out to a variety of stakeholders, a variety of institutions, both public and private, we hope that we'll have a good portfolio of offer to give to the countries. And then we don't want to intervene. We want the countries to find the service providers, the products, the resources that they want, and to use them to implement their pathways. That's as a first intervention, Francesco, from my side.
Thank you, Stefanos. But if I can ask a quick follow-up question, I mean, clearly you've given us good news. Some countries are really serious about having strategies for food system transformation. But what about the accountability, monitoring and evaluation? You are planning for a 2023 stock taking. How is that going to work? And how are you going also to monitor the action of the private sector?
So at the national level, we see that many countries are starting up with monitoring and evaluation frameworks. I would like to take and they are building on existing frameworks. I would like to take the example of Africa. We were in Africa together 3 weeks ago, I think 4 weeks ago, Francesco, in the AGRF. And there we saw the pivotal role that the African Union is doing on monitoring and evaluation on food system transformations. They have their framework, they have their indicators, and they measure it. The hub is not going to establish a monitoring framework on impact indicators, because we have the impact indicators, we have the SDGs, we have the specific targets, and we don't need to replace them. But we would like to establish a framework that we will be tracking the institutional change that's happening in the government, but also the behavioral change that's happening in the stakeholders and in the private sector, to see how they walk the talk of sustainability. So this system is one of the deliverables that the hub wants to bring together. We are counting on the direct collaboration with the UN Task Force on Food Systems, and it's a work that will start soon once we have all the secondments happening in the hub.
Thank you, Stefano. And now let me move to Doris. Doris, can you tell us what Germany's food systems transformation actions are focusing on? And is there a national mechanism to ensure the coordinated response to ensure healthier and more sustainable diets in Germany?
Okay, thank you. Well, we heard already that food systems all over the world are threatened by climate change, species extinction, and soil degradation. And we also see and are very convinced that we have to find a joint solution to all crises. So we are heading for a systematic transformation, which is translating fundamental changes in our agri-food policies, and which is also clear it's no one-size-fits-all technology or strategy that we could that could solve our problems. Instead, we are looking for coordinated action and multi-purpose approaches, and have the focus very much on also the long-term effects. So our focus is on one side, really the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, and main tool will be the transformation of animal husbandry. And another focus is the expansion of organic farming to 30% of in helping for biodiversity enhancement. Another focus is also that we promote the supply of local vegetable proteins, and also diverse agricultural focused policies. But one is, for us, which is and what we are talking here today, is that the food and nutrition policy itself can also make a change and a considerable contribution to enhancing the transformation of the food system. And we are glad that a growing number of people in Germany is also willing to give shape and to live in this transformation. So we, or the federal government, committed to draw up a food and nutrition strategy, and this has a specific focus with regard to children, and we try to get together with all stakeholder bodies in order to create a healthy environment and for not only focusing on food, but also on exercise. So to have a very good view of the entire environment for nutrition and what is around. So we want to make it as easy as possible for people to make healthy and sustainable choices and change their eating habits. This is not what can be reached with a finger snip or just quickly. It takes a long action, and we know that it's a long way to change into beneficial food environments and patterns, and we have to create there a good movement, and looking that a higher percentage of plant-based foods is used, and another focus was also less food waste and food losses. So I think we have preparatory work which has been carried out in the scope of the UN Food System Summit. So we had a national dialogue and gathered a lot of expert opinions and many good ideas of approaches for the food and nutrition strategy. And we are now on the way to find a good pattern and to get hand in hand with our policy strategies to get forward.
Thank you. Thank you. So I understand you're actually walking your talk, because I learned that, for example, I don't know if it happens also in your ministry, but certainly the Ministry of Economic Cooperation, they cannot serve meat in the meals. They don't eat meat in the ministry. So that's interesting to hear. But I actually wanted to ask a follow-up question on your national reduction and innovation strategy for sugar, fats, and salt in convenient foods. So what are the successes and the challenges in implementing that strategy?
Well, we already heard that reformulation is not everything, but it's something. And we have the national reformulation strategy for sugar, fats, and salt in convenience food. And this is one part of trying to get a better environment for a more healthy choice. And so it's very relevant to get forward, and we observe that we have some positive developments, especially regarding to sugar and in some foodstuffs, not everything, but especially also those redirected to children, but still. And we see there is a big reduction potential in most foods, and especially also with salt. We already heard a lot of sodium today, and I think the reduction in salt is a point which is not as easy to fulfill, because we also have to take into account that all those ingredients, they fulfill also functions in the food relating to taste and texture and shelf life. So there are some limits, but we know, and we are going on to have more scientific advice and scientific evidence to get better targets for reductional patterns, and also to attune those to the target groups which are the most vulnerable. So we are on the way. We are in scientific discussion what we can do, and in the end, maybe it will be a rather simple approach, but we will have to wait it's one part of the entire strategy. So we have much more pieces which fit together. For example, looking also at the restriction of advertising, which is aimed to children and so on.
Well, thank you, Doris. And we're looking forward to the result because we need it for our practice-based evidence. So we need to learn your lessons. But let me now move to the Honorable Minister of Health and Medical Services from Fiji, Dr. Wakanabete. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. Fiji has developed food system pathways to transform the food system. As a small island development state, food imports and trade are a crucial driver of the food system. So, Minister, can you tell us what trade-based challenges Fiji is facing in shaping its food system to ensure that healthy diets are there and are affordable?
Thank you, and thank you for having me here in this session. I want to begin with this statement. In 1970, in our independence, the prevalence of diabetes was 2%. As we speak, it is now 16%. And the Pacific has one of the highest rates of NCDs. This transformation we're talking about today is really in the Pacific now as we speak. And we talk about the global hunger issue. We have to remember that with the challenges that we have around the world at the moment, challenges with transportation, with fuel prices that is happening around the world, at the end of the day, it becomes a choice that our people have to make. Are they going to buy something nutritious, which is more expensive? Or are they going to buy something which is cheaper, but actually less nutritious? And that is a challenge that's happening in small countries such as ours. And again, if you think about it in terms of trade, again, it's the economy of scale. So with the trade, we are dependent on, coming through Australia, New Zealand, and coming to Fiji. So those are some of the challenges we have. What we actually saw when we looked at it, and we looked at the diabetes, going back to diabetes, that 2% to 16%, the biggest rise happened when we had a lot more companies opening up in Fiji to be able to produce locally. And as you rightfully said, the challenge is how do we be able to balance it? Because we need the money. We need money. We need money in terms of the companies that actually are able to, have their agencies in Fiji, have their distribution in Fiji. We need the money. We need the economy, but also at the same time balancing with the challenge that we have now with NCD. And I would think that this is something that Europe has seen the evolution of this. And now you're talking about, and you're beginning, and you've done actually the strategies to be able to handle this. We have a Food and Regulation Act, which is in place. Obviously, the challenge sometimes is the effectiveness of the monitoring that happens. We found that when we kept it within the Ministry of Health, it doesn't work very well, that we needed to shift it, and we gave it to the Anti-Competition Commission. They seem to do a better job than we did. What we also have is, recently we've had the Food and Nutrition Security policy that we just passed in Cabinet. So what we're doing now, the benefit COVID gave to us was that during COVID, when people were locked down, we distributed seeds, we distributed plants, because everybody's got a bit of a backyard. And so they planted. So we started these self-gardens again. The Ministry of Agriculture is going through, all the work that it's doing and the many incentives, including, offering farmers the equipment to be able to do their farms. So really regenerating the agricultural area. Fruits and vegetables are cheap in Fiji. So you can probably pick a mango. One of the mangoes I saw, I looked upstairs and I looked at that mango and I said, in Fiji, that mango will probably be $1 Fijian, which is about 30 euro cents, that mango. So there are things that, that we have, that we can build, that grow locally. So we're encouraging a lot of these local foods. We're encouraging the regeneration of the agriculture ministry, but also our ocean. 80% of the tuna stocks in the world come from us in the Pacific. come from the Pacific. So we really need to regenerate our ocean also. So the Ministry of Fisheries over the last 20 years or so have begun, and traditionally, you in the village system, in the tribal system, you have your own place where you fish, and traditionally you put a taboo or you stop fishing on a particular time. So we went back onto that, and we found that by doing that, we were able to regenerate our ocean. So eventually, we now have abundance of vegetables, abundance of fruits, abundance of our aquatic species that's now able to balance against the challenge we have with trade on the other side and the big multinational companies and the food that they bring. This, we hope, will continue to grow, and we will continue to be able to transform back, hopefully not down. Well, I know that it will never be 2%, but at least we can hold it at 16% and bring it down. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Minister. I mean, the way you speak, I mean, not all ministers of health have the knowledge of the food system transformation that you seem to have. So I wonder how does it work in your interaction with your colleagues in the cabinet, Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries? I mean, do you think that health has become so prominent in Fiji to drive that transformation, or is it more the concern about the livelihoods or the concerns about the climate change impact that is driving this transformation?
Yeah, thank you. There's two parts to your question that I want to address both. Number one is we have great collegiality within cabinet. The Honorable Prime Minister, we're good colleagues, and if I may pass a word of advice to here in Europe, one great way to have a great cabinet is to just be good friends. Just be good friends. So it's a great cabinet, and the collegiality, and we pick up the phone and we talk to one another, we vibe by one another, and talk about issues that we think are important. And if I know that there's a particular cabinet paper around health that is important, I talk to my other colleagues and we discuss it. And the Honorable Prime Minister is very responsible. But you touched a little bit on climate change, and I just want to talk a little bit about that. In the Pacific, when we talk about climate change in the Pacific, I said it in my last speech yesterday. Tropical Cyclone Winston, which was the first Category 5 cyclone that made landfall in Fiji and devastated 25% of our economy. So no more root crops. There were islands where people were uplifted and moved to the mainland. They had nothing to eat. Nothing to eat. So noodles was the only thing they could pick on. So ever since Tropical Cyclone Winston, we've had 14 more cyclones. One more Cat 5, a few Cat 4s, and a lot of Cat 3s come through Fiji. That's Fiji alone, not including the other 17 countries in the Pacific. What climate change is doing to us is making saltwater intrusion into our soil, which actually just all the crops that you grow this year, they whack it down the following year. That's what climate change is doing to us. Climate change, apart from what I've discussed earlier, is actually also threatening us and taking away the ability to have nutritious food and pushing our people into cheaper alternatives.
Thank you. Thank you. And let me now turn to Anders. Anders, can you tell us whether the food and public health agencies in Sweden are collaborating towards a healthy and sustainable food system? Just following up on this conversation about the intersectoral collaboration, really.
No, thank you. And a pleasure being here and pleasure being next to Fiji. We are quite far away from each other globally. We were actually joining hands some years back at the UN, co-hosting the big conference about the oceans and what we need to do in terms of the oceans, and also looking at the blue economy and what we actually need to be very careful of when it comes to the protein that we're getting from our oceans. So very happy to be sitting next to you. How the public health agency and the food agencies are working together. They're working quite closely together today. But what one needs to understand also that, Sweden is a privileged country. I would also say that we have quite a nice, I would say, and positive dynamic in between the private sector, the consumers, and the public regulations. So this dynamic in between the three is moving us, not dramatically quick, but still in the right direction. So the changes in terms of consumers' demands, how industry is then basically responding to this, and we see big changes here in terms of what food is being available and also the prices. Now we have a crisis, of course, on the food prices as everyone, but also how this is also then being connected to public policies. So what the government did, and this actually started with the Lancet report some years back, beginning to speak about not nutrition, but food system, and that food system matters for our climate, but also for our health. That inspired at that time our Director General for our food agency. The government then did some more work preparing for the Global Health, for the Food Summit, and there was a Swedish roadmap. And one thing that came out of this roadmap was then now a joint assignment to our Public Health Agency and our Food Agency combined to look at now indicators, a maximum of 24 goals and indicators for Sweden to move towards a sustainable food system to provide us with healthy diets within the planetary boundaries. We still haven't seen it. They got the assignment last year, but the experience we have before from having national goals and targets so that we can follow up to measure, we have reasonably good or quite good reporting system, will, I think, help us moving in this direction. What will be important, I think, also when they are going now to develop those goals and indicators is that traditionally we have been looking at nutrition. How much iron are we getting and how much sugar are we actually consuming? But also to look at the health impact. Because a healthy diet, at least for me, is a means in order to be able to get more healthy populations. So hopefully they are, by joining hands and working together, not just looking at what are the inputs, but also what are the outcomes of changing now the direction of this, but taking a holistic approach to both food production, food consumption, and also looking at the food waste, which is also a big issue on the agenda.
Thank you, Anders. And I hope that Stefanos took note of what Anders is saying, because that would be very useful for the food system summit stock taking in 2023. I mean, the kind of analysis you're doing with the common metrics. But I think Sweden has also been very active on one of the policy actions that WHO recommend, which is the one on public food procurement. Would you like to tell us something about that?
I mean, the specific efforts that has been going on for quite some years, those are the public meals. And again, no, if you don't know the Swedish system, but both education and healthcare is mainly publicly financed over taxation. So we also have the possibility when it comes to the public procurement of the meals being served in schools and in hospitals. And this has been a policy for a long time in terms of what you need to live up to in terms of the quality, the sustainability, and the health sort of aspects of those meals being served. We serve about 3 million meals every day, and this has had a dramatic positive impact. And what is interesting is that they have been also sort of putting in those policies is that those meals should not just be healthy, they should be affordable, they should be based on a sustainability policy sort of, but also they should be tasty. And also they should be served in an environment where you can actually enjoy this meal. And let me finish by this, and you heard me saying this before, because I think one of the most important thing, yes, economic factors are driving this. Sometimes in a positive way, we can get positive tipping points moving the food industry in the right way, which I think we see some of, we need to see more of. But I think most importantly are the values of people and the consumers. And I've told this story many times, and I told to Tom just here that I'm considered to be very rich in Sweden, not because I have a high salary. I have, but that's not why. But I have a garden. I have a local food production. 4 months of the year, I will go into my garden and I will see what we're going to have for dinner. I've got my own greenhouse. I grow my own potatoes, my own tomatoes. This, my friends are then saying, you are really rich and wealthy. This is to be wealthy in Sweden today. Thank you.
And I'm told that you can also select mushrooms and make risotto.
Yeah. And those values are driving development, I would say. No one would smoke here today. When I was working at WHO and JW Lee said we're going to stop, we will not hire people that are smoking. And we were coming down to the UN building and we're going to have the World Health Assembly, and they refused then to have that smoke free. Today, it's not an issue.
Yeah.
So the values have changed, and we need to do that with food as well.
Folks, thank you. We have 4 minutes. Can you make 2 quick questions, 1 and 2? Okay, you can start there. These 2 people, 1 and 2.
Hi, my name is Liza Dunn and I'm from Bayer. And I have a question that pertains to Dr. Friedman's point about what we know and what we don't know. So before we embark on the great food transformation, we should look at practice-based evidence. We have 10,000 years of experience with organic farming and 50 years of food security in the West because of scientific advances in agriculture. And the global South deserves to have access to that too. What are we doing as health experts to engage with the experts in agriculture to make sure we're making sound policies decisions that will not compromise food security?
Quick answer, please pass the microphone.
Well, I think others probably could answer this better than I, but your point is a very important one. We're not going to solve the nutrition problem solely looking at the health and food context. We need a multi-sectoral approach. We need to have friends among cabinet, as we heard, but we also need a head of state commitment to saying sustainability is important, sufficient food is important throughout the life course, and healthy food is important. So it's not a question of experimenting on people. It's a question of preventing people from being inadvertently experimented on with foods that are constructed to maximize consumption rather than health.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm an Italian doctor from Trento in the north of Italy. And we talked about climate change. We talked about, sustainable food system. And at the last moments we talked about with Doris, we talked about plant-based diet and also about ocean issues and land farming issues. But I couldn't help noticing that we didn't talk about intensive farming and meat consumption, especially in the Western kind of like diet system. And so I was wondering, since we know all the effects of this kind of diet and also the overconsumption of fish and the kind of overfishing issue, what do you suggest to do to address these kind of issues that are huge and impacting other parts of the world and farming and etc., as we said also yesterday in this same room?
Thank you. Thank you. Doris, 30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Yes, well, I think we have to look that we need social acceptance, and we have to make clear that healthy diet and healthy environment is one solution, and this is just a way to keep talking about it, to start with transformation, and that's the only way start to do it.
Okay, thank you, Doris. And time is up, unfortunately. So this only leaves me the 30 seconds to sincerely thank all the speakers, the one here, the one online, all participants. I know you would have liked to say a lot more. Please follow up with the speakers in the corridor. My takeaway message is that we can do it.
Yes.
Food system transformation is on the agenda now more than ever. It's urgent for all the reasons you've heard. We now have to work to implement it. Thank you very much.